Picture the scene. You've had a hard day, you get home from work late, and you can't be asked to cook. So you think, you know what, I'm gonna treat myself to a takeaway. Well, this season, I pretty much did exactly that, except instead of pizza, I spent £35 million on a Portuguese centre-back. We've had an absolutely wild season, which, as you're about to see, could potentially be the start of something great, but right now, we're having a lovely old time over on stream doing some signings, some scouting, and general vibes, so catch us over there after you've caught up over here. Now, I've mentioned in the last couple of these recaps that I was working on a big project in the background. Unfortunately, that has turned out to not be viable after a couple of weeks' work on that, which, whilst very disappointing for me, you wouldn't have even really seen anything about that, does mean we'll be able to get back to more regular uploads on the channel other than the recaps in the future. So we came into season 19 of Building a Nation with Sirens of Malta, knowing that this was our last big chance to get some huge points gains before that 18.5 point season gets wiped away. In addition, we also felt we were on a much more stable tactical footing and had set the target of Champions League semi-final at bare minimum this year. But before we get to that, there is the little matter of the Club World Cup. Now, because we are so far into the future, I don't actually have the games for it saved anymore. But as you can see, we won our group with Boca, Man United and Club America. And you're thinking, oh yeah, that sounds reasonable. You beat Boca and you beat Club America. Yeah, no. What a weird setup. So our results were actually an 8-0 victory over Club America and a 3-0 over Man United. We were feeling confident at this point, as you can imagine, and then we lost to Boca Juniors because it's just what happens. We were, of course, rotating because we were already dead qualified at that point. But once again, we've really killed it in the Club World Cup. That then continued as we humped Arsenal 4-0. There's something about these big teams. They play full-strength sides, but they really don't take it seriously. We then took out Real Madrid 2-0 in the quarterfinals to reach the semi-final of the Club World Cup for the second time in the save. Unfortunately, we then had a really bad result against Porto in the semi-final. We were massively the better side, and they just got 2 lucky goals off defensive mistakes. It will happen. Frustrating, though, particularly as River Plate would have been our opponents in the final. We then played a mad tactic against Milan in the third place playoff and lost 7-6. The less said about that, the better. Oh, and this happened. Nearly. And we're benefiting from it massively. Reynoso now to take one off the other side. Jezanovic. Oh, nearly. Wait. Oh! So transfers this season have been mighty hectic, as you can probably tell from the things I've already said, plus, you know, the title and things like that. We've spent £100 million on new players over the course of this year, but we've also sold £100 million worth of players, because I'm all about the balance. But let's talk about some of the outs first, before we get into some of the good stuff. And the biggest of those was David Lakrimi, the young Norwegian winger slash whatever the hell we were doing with him. And basically, the simple fact of the matter is we picked him up very, very cheap. Well, relatively cheap anyway. We liked the look of him, but we were obviously trying to use him as that experimental left wing back, but predominantly on his right foot whilst not playing as an inverted wing back. It actually worked really nicely in our old style of play, but we noticed in this new tactic that it just really wasn't having the results, and it really did rely on those wing backs pushing forward and getting to the byline. So when the bid came in January from Al Ain of £22 million for him, I thought, you know what? Yes, we'll probably do that. I believe it's like at least quadrupling our money. Oh, sorry, way more than that. It was nearly 10x. We bought £2.4 million, sold for £22 million. We're doing a lot of that. Buy low, sell high. The next one is even better. This is Alberto Tenconi, and you're like, who's that? Well, you see, so here's the thing. We signed him in the summer because he was available after being released by Atalanta. I think he'd forced a move out of Atalanta, actually, but he'd forced the release. He's a really good player, and the thought was, we bring him in, his contract was quite high, he either plays for us, or we can try to flip him for huge money to someone else. And then in January, he said, I'm not playing, and I thought, I know we're going to end up having to hire an intermediary and selling you for like £5 million. And then Fiorentina went, bro, I got this. When they decided to bid £25.5 million for him in January, we signed him in July for free and sold him 6 months later for £25.5 million. This is how we keep this club afloat, because we simply do not have the commercial power as a lot of the other big sides in Europe do. But being able to bring in these guys when their contracts expire and flogging them to other big European sides, usually not for this kind of money, but occasionally you can do it, is such a great way of us being able to finance my Wonder Kid addiction. We also somehow dug ourselves out of the Jesus Garcia hole. And now, if you recall, I believe we actually signed him last season or the season before for quite a large fee, and then realized it was a bit of a poor piece of business from us. And then Al Nassr said, it's okay, lads, we'll give you £18.5 million for him. Now he's on 400 grand a week, so you know what, Jesus, get that back. And even better news, I was also able to shift off the bill Gabriel Martinez, the guy that we'd signed from Young Boys last season on a bit of a whim for like £4 million. Bayer Leverkusen took him off our hands for 11.75 million, and we're just making profit after profit after profit. Last big one to show you is Joel Ambrosio. He's not a player I particularly wanted to get rid of. He'd been on loan at Hibernians for many years, had done fantastically well. Had only really not got Angola caps as many as he should have done due to the fact they actually have an even better goalkeeper who came through a Portuguese side. So he was kind of stymied a little bit by that. But unfortunately, he refused to sign a new contract, which is a real shame, and he would never have been our starter. At best, he would have always been our backup goalkeeper. So in the end, once he said he was not going to sign a new deal, I decided to see what we could get. And in the end, we got just under £10 million for him, which is still very low, but we signed him on a free transfer. He did his business for us and helped out Malta a lot, and we still got 10 million at the other end. And he's earning £500,000 a week. There were a few little other outs here for £1 million there, £1 million there. A lot of that was actually to other Maltese sides as as well, but it was mostly just like little bitty transfers to keep the budget popped up. So now let's talk about the ins. First of whom was Viktor Mamedov, a Ukrainian striker who paid £1.8 million from FK Alexandria, which is not a team I've normally signed players from. They maybe don't have the best facilities or whatever, and generally speaking I find Ukrainian players are extremely expensive, but this guy sort of broke that mold a little bit. Came in for that price. He's been on loan at Hamron this year, 16 goals for them over all competitions. I think they've got a real deal there, and hopefully we can keep him there for the foreseeable future. He's just a really nice all-round striker and seems to do the business, and look at that value. Then a really fun one, 3.4 million for Michel Bizarma. Obviously the idea was he's just a pure tent poles. He's got everything you want: dribbling, finishing, first touch, composure, pace, acceleration, agility and balance. He ticks every single meta player box in FM, and I think that kind of shows with his 11 goals in 11 games for us this season. The idea was to put him in the loan farm, but the fact is he's just become an incredibly stable deputy that we can play in league matches, and he doesn't really care that much, and he's just elite in the match engine, but just not in those like really big games. But it's just such a useful player to have. I'd love to loan him out, I really would though. We then also dropped, well, you saw this last time, 8.25 million on Albi Arifi. This has been a bit of a disaster, honestly. We managed to get him out on loan to Hamron, and I thought, brilliant, that's perfect, and he's just not been it. Only 4 goals in 22 appearances for them. Despite that pace and that finishing, he's just not got enough else about him, and I think he's not even one we're going to be able to cut our losses on. I think he's the kind of guy that is just going to probably end up leaving for free at some point. But, you know, this is why we do all the other deals, to make sure that we occasionally can get it wrong. Also dropped 200k on Arsene Bamba from ASEC Mimosas, everybody's favourite Ivorian wonder kid generator. And frankly, I don't think he has the highest potential ceiling. That's the thing that maybe will get him there. But he's still a very, very good player. Hasn't played a lot for us this year, and I really like a loan for him, but he's such a well-rounded footballer. And the fact is, were we to get some injuries, he actually could do that job as our number 10. So very happy to have him here, would still like a loan. And another signing that we were quite pleased with is David Menyevar from Isidro Metapan over in El Salvador. Haven't had a good El Salvadoran for a while, and he's just a really solid defensive midfield player. Great tackling, some lovely mental attributes, decent physicals minus the jumping reach, good on both feet, and again, he's been on loan at Goodyear this year, 27 appearances for them over the course of the year, and I think he could be the kind of guy that might be able to grow into a really capable player for them over the coming years if we can keep him on loan and he can keep developing. The best part is that's just the guys that joined us on the first day of the transfer window. I haven't even gotten to the guys we signed in the summer technically. Let's go. The first is this chap here, Giuseppe Didario. Now, this is a story and a half. So again, he's another of the guys that we signed on a free transfer with the aim of flipping him to another side to try to get a little bit of cash out of him. Good player, but unlikely to really be able to get in our first team at this stage. This is a hell of a one though. So you'll know that he's on loan at Udinese at the moment. Now, this is the fun part. They put a loan contract on the table for us, which I don't know who's advising them, but they're not doing a very good job. They're paying us a minimum of £6 million just to loan him this season, and that's if he plays every game. If he doesn't, or for unused stuff, it could be as high as £11 million. In addition, there is, I believe, also a £20 million fee at the end of this loan as well. They may not trigger it, but the fact is, either way, we've already kind of paid for it, and they're paying his wages as well, just by having him out on loan. And if they want him back again, then they're more than welcome to him if they want to pay me another £11 million. Now we have one I really like. This is Alex Frimpong, 18-year-old Ghanaian international who we picked up from Norton for £6 million. The only issue with him really is his 5'11", but he has got 12 jumping reach, which is actually fairly solid. Not amazing, it's not elite by any means, but I just really like the rest of his attributes. He's phenomenally good for his age group, and the fact that he's gone on loan to Master this year makes it even better because he's getting that game time and actually getting a chance to develop. So he feels like an exciting one to keep an eye on. We also dropped a massive £15 million on Valmir. Now the reason for this was, now that we'd kind of come to terms with the fact that we were going to play as Segunda Volante, it's difficult to find players that really occupy and have the perfect setup for that role, i.e. guys that can be solid defensively, decent in the tackle, good passing and whatnot, mobile, and actually can finish and be composed in the process. A very tough set of skills to have, which is why we're so lucky to have Pebbles. Valmir is basically Pebbles, but slightly worse going forward and decent going backwards, basically. He's pretty much operated as a backup player for us this year, and I felt that £15 million was a lot, but we really needed someone to rotate around with Pebbles. Now, we do have Lakazar Hubanov, our very young Bulgarian midfielder that you may have seen a few years ago when we signed him at 16, so that was been about 5 years ago at this point. And I think long term he is him, but for the time being we needed guys now, and Valmir actually has been able to slot into the first team this season, and that's really, really nice to see. We also dropped £4 million on Jose Pablo Pinares, who again is just what I call tent pole strikers. I know I say that a lot. What I'm referring to when I'm saying tent poles is the things that hold up the tent of a striker, I suppose. So, you know, dribbling, finishing, first touch, pace, acceleration, composure, agility, balance. He's not ticking all those boxes in the same way that the other guy was, but he ticks enough of them that it was well worth dropping the money, particularly when you look at how much he's worth. I think we could just sell him at some point. Then we also dropped another £15 million on a Brazilian, because we just love doing that today. This is Leo, £15.25 million from Palmeiras. Now, we don't need more centre-backs, but we buy them anyway. And the reason, I mean, you probably already know the reason. He's a centre-back with 19 acceleration and 16 pace. He's the ultimate covering defender, really. Like, he's decent technically. Bravery is a little low. Aggression's decent, though. But it's those ridiculous physical attributes that he has that makes him such an interesting player to mess around with. Hasn't played a great deal for us yet this season, but he did only join in January, I should stress. But I still think that he's a really fun player to have. And he's half Japanese as well, which means his actual name is Leonardo Nishi. Love to see it. Spending didn't stop there, though, as we also spent £5 million on Oscar Lopez, an American international centre-back. Similar kind of story with Alex Frimpong, except he's actually worse in the air. We are retraining him at the moment to potentially play in one of those defensive midfield roles because he's got decent work rate, and we know that our ball-winning midfielder very much needs that, and his stamina isn't too bad either. Still, really useful player. So that brings me to the big one, and I believe personally that this is an overpayment. I think there's very little way that this can't be an overpayment because we've spent £36 million on him. However, when you see a player that has a couple of those attributes that are very unlikely to improve that much, so high, so young, you take that chance, and we decided eventually we would do it. This is Valenhaupt, a, well, 18-year-old Portuguese/Brazilian, though he's Brazilian as his first nationality, centre-back that we've signed from Tondela. Tondela in this save have had over the last couple of years, like sometimes up to 5 players on the next-gen list in a single season. They've been producing at a rate that, whatever they're putting in the water there, Portugal have got a bright future. Point being, he had 18 tackling. And as we know, tackling is one of those attributes that just simply doesn't seem to improve that much. At best, over the course of a really good player's career, it seems like you might get it to go up by 1, but nevertheless, to have it 18 to begin with is absolutely wild. Great marking as well. His heading is decent, but we are trying to get him to work on that a little bit. He's 6'4", good on both feet, 15 jumping reach. He's got 14 pace. The one thing that is like, is that aggression side of things. Low consistency, but he's young. It's a huge amount of money to spend, I grant you, but we just felt like treating ourselves, particularly with a guy called Valenhaupt. You know, you can't really go wrong with him. Well, you might be able to, but here he is. I'm hoping that over the course of the next few seasons, we can either find him alone, which would be crazy, or he can just become one of those second-line defenders that we've got now that we're starting to have too many of them. We've actually almost got 3 lines worth of defenders at this point because some of them came back from loan and they're very good too. We almost overfloweth our cup with defenders, but we may well be able to sell one of them in the summer, possibly for Fana, for around about £35 million, and it will balance this out perfectly. We actually turned down a bid of 37 for him from Dortmund, and I wish I hadn't now. Now, before we get into talking about the league and also the cup, because I know some of you guys wanted to talk about that this time around as well, a little trick, another one for you, and another magical date, which is always fun, and that is that one of the things that you can do, obviously, when a player is out on loan at a club in your league, is you can offer them for transfer, because if you offer them out for transfer, the only club they'll be offered to is the one they're on loan at, and I'm sure most of you have tried this in the past, and you just get hit with a giant wall of clubs decline to make offer for X player, right? That's a thing, we all know it. However, Martini from chat found something rather special, and that is that if you do that on May 1st specifically, although apparently it can also work on November 1st too, but May 1st is the only time I've tested it, for whatever reason, the clubs just go, yes, I think I will have that player. And as a result, we were able to get bids the first time I did it, because I didn't do it on all players just to test. We got like, I don't know, it was like a good success rate. This year, I got bids on 30 of my players, good ones too, from other clubs in Malta, actually wanted to take them permanently. And there's a good thing about that, because now with the transfer values of the players across the league actually being quite decent, it now means that us giving them genuine assets that they can then sell later potentially can be really good for them, rather than just having the loans and actually getting permanent signings, particularly as I believe that weighs more into them getting more loans from us later when they've got slightly less of them to begin with. I don't know. Point being, May 1st, offer out those players that you've got on loan, give it a try, and you'll see what I mean. You usually get the offers in by the 6th of May. Just be prepared for an enormous wall of them. Since the tactics have remained entirely the same this year as what they were towards the end of last season, to the league, where we actually only won the league by 10 points this season. A bit of a slowdown from us in many ways, but it wasn't us getting worse. It was Sweetie getting better. The fact is, they were at one point, I think, 17 points clear of third place. They had a little bit of a blip towards the end of the year, but 20 wins out of 26 is wild from them. I think it's the best second place season from a team in over a decade, or nearly a decade. I think when Hamren got 64 one time. Hamren, of course, get back into Europe. They also win the cup in there too. Birkirkara having a nice time, and you'll see why later on, but also 4th in the league, really good. Hibernians back into Europe does kind of suck. I would have preferred to have Zabar, since they've at least been our latest team that have done it, and Gudja at least doing it, but Hibernians are back into Europe for the first time in I believe 2 or 3 seasons now, so hopefully they'll take a load of loans in the summer. Otherwise they could be very well the team that lets us down in Europe next year, and we can't have that. Nashar and Sleem are relegated. I believe they were actually the promoted sides again, but in fairness, this season it was a lot closer. Like, nobody was really cut adrift at any point, which I guess is a good sign. In the second tier, well, would you believe it, it's Luta and Floriana coming back up again. Leah, though, a semi-professional side, were very close at one point. They occupied second a few times this season, and Zuri, our affiliate side, who don't take all the loans, are doing mad things, and that's the best finish they've had in the entire save, unlike Dingley, who they've got like 80 players on loan from us. This season, genuinely, their entire first team squad was on loan from us. They didn't have a single player that they owned in their own first team squad. maybe we're actually harming them more than helping. So, to the Cup. You'll see that Hammer'n beat Tarshin this time around. Now, the problem with the Cup is that the semi-final is scheduled to take place literally a day after the March international break ends. And as a result, the players that come back from international duty are all absolutely exhausted and cannot play. And because we have so many players that get on international duty now, it means that you often end up fielding like a 5th string side. And that's why we often end up knocked out of the Cup at that round a lot of the time. It does affect the other teams as well, but they have less players on international duty, so they don't kind of get the same effect of it, which is why you'll see here from the past winners that we've not actually won as many as you might think. We won a few in a row towards the start here, but then we went 3 years without winning it, didn't even reach the final in some of these seasons. Then a couple of wins there too, back-to-back ones for Goodyear. Admittedly, one was one we threw to Goodyear because we needed that result for them to get there, but back to winning it last year. And then of course this year, Hammer'n beat Tarshin in the final after Tarshin had absolutely clobbered us in the semi-final. But that is enough about that, because it's time to get into the meat and the gravy of today's video, and that is of course us in Europe. Last year was an absolute disaster by us, scraping into the knockouts literally with a record low points tally and doing it, I believe, on goal difference in the end is not what you want to be. This year, though, we felt with the tactical setup as it was, we'd got less of a formation and more of a system overall, and I think that's played a massive, massive role in hopefully us having a better season. Annoyingly, the game has done that thing again where it's not cashed our first Champions League game this time. I might actually have to move this like mid-season save point up slightly further, but it seems to like alternate from season to season. I even set this one really early in December, so for some reason, I think it's just the number of matches you play can sometimes mess with it. Either way, we beat FC Copenhagen 4-0, Pebbles, Kadri, Padilla, and Alberto Tenconi, of course, was in the squad at that point. Comfortable result. And then we got this, what I would consider to be a very, very good performance away at Liverpool. We looked decent on the night. They were definitely slightly the better side in this one. Morales, of course, marathon man, getting them an equaliser here after Everton Krastev had put us in front. But it shows that we're sort of able to compete a bit more with the really good sides, the very best sides in Europe, even away from home. And I think that's a real stretch. Even when we were last season when we lost to Liverpool there, this is a massive step in the right direction. And frankly, you don't need to be perfect away from home to win Champions League. You simply need to be decent away, get those draws and narrow defeats, so you can then hopefully take them back home and do the business, because that's where we really excel. Especially as we then follow that up by doing the exact same thing by getting a great result away at Bayern Munich. They got a penalty. It was frustrating as all hell because they hadn't really created a great deal of opportunities in the game, but they got that penalty. Luckily, it was yet another bailout from one of our wingbacks. This time it was Vida Zinha off the bench, still at 33, doing bits for us in European games. He man of the match award here away at Bayern Munich, and it was a huge result because that's draws away at Bayern and Liverpool, 5 points on the board, and these were two of our very tough games that we had in the group stage. Only one real tough game was to come after this. We felt this was a real chance. Nearly as many points as last year already. And then we put a clobbering down on Villarreal. Padilla with a hat-trick in this one. Absolutely superb performance. 2 goals for Juan Carlos Perez as well, giving us a 5-0 hammering of Villarreal to reach the same tally as last year in half the number of games, and feeling really good about what was to come. Except what was to come was this. It happens. It's a frustrating one, though. A 2-2 draw at home against Marseille. They took the lead through Jean-Claude Roux. Gert Gillet bailed us out. He's been having quite a goal-scoring season again. Pebbles put us back in front before Noah Perrin gave them the equaliser. It's more the fact that they had 2 shots on target and a grand total of 0.31. It's just one of those things. But we didn't panic and then did this. Sirens 2, Manchester City 0. And this was the one I was really excited about getting to because I wanted to test this at home against a big, big side. We hadn't really had that chance. We'd been great away from home, but I wanted to see if we could do the shutdown potential while still being good going forward. And as you can see, it took us a long time to get going in this game, but Lahovi and Reynoso's goals were enough. We were really kind of quite evenly matched in the first half, but in the second half we just grew into the game and eventually took our chances, basically. What a result. After Christmas, things got even better for us. A 2-0 victory away at Lazio, Perez and Padilla with the goals. You'll notice they've been really contributing an awful lot to our time this season, and Padilla has just been unbelievable. Unfortunately, Gutierrez did get an injury in this game, which meant that we had to actually bring in Hungarian backup goalkeeper Adam Mertscher, who you wouldn't have even seen because he was just another random freebie that we picked up to move on, end up being our backup goalkeeper at the time being while we were looking for someone new. Another win though, huge result. And then we followed that up with another very comfortable performance away at Celtic with goals from Carlos Vieira and Valmir Mertz with a clean sheet in this game too. Vieira was absolutely phenomenal. Valmir man of the match, though, definitely one of his better performances for us over the course of this year. But that left us with a really healthy points tally, and we were looking so strong defensively. The sheer lack of chances we're giving up other teams is actually mad. And what that meant, of course, is that we came 4th, which is our highest ever finish in a Champions League group. To go from where we were, 24th, scraping by, tactical tweak, didn't even look that good in the first game we played it, but we've stuck with it and it's completely revolutionized us this season. Like 19 goals scored, but it's the 4 goals conceded. We are miserly at the back and still have the potential to put the smackdown on teams when the opportunity arises. 18 points on the board there. Absolutely brilliant season from us. No complaints about that. Shout out to Porto in second as well. And that, of course, meant that we got a bye through straight to the round of 16, which is always very nice. And then the football gods blessed us for once with an actually winnable tie against Norgeland, of all people, who amazingly have managed to knock out Chelsea in the first knockout round, which is wild. But then something very interesting happened. We went to Denmark, and I don't think we'll ever be allowed back in Denmark again. I have no idea what happened. This is by far the biggest knockout of the Champions League result that I've ever had in all my years playing FM. Norgeland 0, Sirens 11. We were 6-0 up at half-time, and usually in those kind of games, you're like, oh, it'll finish 6-1. It didn't. We made a few subs, freshened the team up, and they just kept going in this game. Padilla had 4 assists. Krastev had 3 assists. Reynoso got 2 goals. Perez got 2 goals. Everybody got a goal. Alberto came off the bench and scored twice. 6.25 XG for 11 goals in this game. So we felt pretty confident about chances in the second leg, you know? And then naturally, we won 2-1. It's just one of those things. Krastev gave us the lead. Yahovi got a penalty, and we thought, okay, time to push on a little bit. But no, Stefani Yao got one back for them. There was hella complacency, you might say. We weren't particularly on the ball in this game, but a 13-1 victory on aggregate to push us through to the quarterfinals. And all of a sudden, we thought, you know what? Yeah, we could actually do this, especially as other teams that are major size were falling left, right, and centre. Man United were out. Barca were out. PSG were out. Loads of big teams were out. And then we got drawn against Benfica in the next round. Not a bad side by any means. 8th in the group stage, no pushovers. But we did the business. Away from home, kept it tight at the back, just like we have done all this time. Padilla, in the 91st minute, headed one. Bear in mind, he's probably the shortest player on the pitch. Headed it home, the ball bounced off the floor, and he just nuts it into the back of the net. 1-0, great result away from home. And then at home, it was more of the same. Gonzalo Reynoso with 2 goals for us, giving us a 3-0 lead on aggregate. Unfortunately, we did give up a long-range goal in the 94th minute of this one, and Krastev did get an injury in this game. That's a foreshadowing moment there. But again, really miserly at the back. Good going forward. 3-1 through to the semi-finals. And the semi-final would face us against Manchester City. And we'd get to play them for the second and third times this season. And given what happened earlier this year, we felt very confident, especially as if we were to get past City, we'd face either Atletico or Porto in the Champions League final. And then we did this. Sirens 3, Manchester City 0. Pebbles with a great goal. Gert Gillet with an absolute screamer, followed up by one more for Jose Padilla, who had another one of the games of his life, as it were. He's been unreal this season. 2 assists in this game and a goal for yet another man of the match performance. He's been incredible. Goalkeeping again from Gutierrez, who was now back in goal, was phenomenal in this game. Even Vida, who had to come in for the injured Krastev, did a brilliant job. And we thought, you know what? 3-0 lead from the first leg. We are surely in the driving seat here, given how good we've been defensively away from home in the Champions League this season. We were this close. And then, in the few days between the 2 matches, both of our remaining right-backs got injured. So Vida was out, as was Sauerschnig. Bad times. We have 3 right wing backs eligible in the Champions League, which usually should be enough, and somehow they'd all managed to get injured right when it mattered the most. Now, Sauerschnig would actually be able to play the next game, and Krastev would be able to be on the bench, but neither of them had any level of fitness. And then this happened. Yeah. It just heartbreaking. A 5-0 defeat. We were 1-0 down at half time, and it's not even just the defeat. But I mean, look at this. It's just one of those things that it's just FM football will do that to you, man. It's a couple of the goals. I wouldn't normally show you goals like this just randomly, but I feel like I have to, because some of this stuff was just like throw laptop, not that this is a laptop, out the window stuff. I believe this was the first of many absolute errors here. The way that Pebbles just passes this ball straight into the path of a City player. This is players that have really been completely composed the entire time doing stuff like that. It was just like a spell of madness at the start of the second half, but the worst one was this one. It was Van der Meulen's second goal. This, I have no words for. Players that are just completely normal most of the time, just plays it into nobody, then he lumps it in off the crossbar. The sort of goals that you see once in a save, and we just got absolutely murked by it in this one game. It's such a shame, because I felt we'd done all we could, but sometimes you just have to hold your hands up and be like, there is nothing that we could have done in this game that would have made any difference if stuff like that is going in against you, when your players are doing things like that they've shown no signs of doing at any point this season. That's just how it is sometimes. And it's no longer a case that they don't like big matches. We almost exclusively have players that do. It's just one of those things, unfortunately. Just bad luck and bad play. But I feel like we've certainly improved a lot this year, given what we'd shown here. But it was very frustrating, because we should be in a final. And I think if we'd got there, we'd definitely be the winners, because we're better than Atletico. And frankly, I think we're better than Porto, despite them coming second. So despite all that heartbreak, we did, of course, have other Maltese friends in Europe. And this year, we really hoped that at least all 4 of them would be able to get to the group stages. I'm looking at you, Zabar. Last time around, they'd actually played quite well in spite of some particularly unlucky draws. But this time we felt they had had to do slightly better, and they did exactly that, getting narrow victories over FC Utrecht, then Botoshani to force their way into the big group for the very first time, and that was the one we were really worried about. As next, it was Birkirkara's turn, but they'd have to start in the second qualifying round of the Europa League, but then home and away victories against Lesničar, then followed by an absolutely tremendous away win against Fenerbahce, which was the surprising thing of all there, before unfortunately falling at the final hurdle against Dinamo Kiev. However, I actually see that as a good thing, because I'd much rather have Birkirkara in the Conference League than in the Europa League, because this is a chance for them potentially to do something for us. Hamrin, for the first time in this entire save, got guaranteed group stage progression this time, so we don't even have to talk about them. They went straight into the Europa League by virtue of us now being 7th in the coefficients, which is nice. And part of that benefit as well meant that Sweetie United also got to start in the third round of qualifying for the Champions League, so less rounds for them to potentially get through, and boy did they cut it close, getting a 111th minute winner against Braga to reach the playoff round, where unfortunately they fell to home and away defeats, slightly surprisingly, to Nordsjælland, although less surprising given how well they did until they met us. They haven't seen nothing yet, but it did mean Sweetie would of course go into the Europa League group stage as well, but that's okay. 2 in each, not a problem. That felt pretty stable and comfortable for us. So we're going to start with the Europa League stuff first, their little adventure of Hamrin and Sweetie, not a cartoon I've ever watched. And they ballsed it up in quite ignominious fashion, honestly. Both of them didn't get out of the group. Disappointing, just bad results. Like, Hamrin beat Legia and they beat Crvena Zvezda. They got draws against Dinamo Batumi. Gladbach's a good draw. Dinamo Batumi got to be winning that game. That is a disgrace. And then defeats the Sporting Besiktas, Maccabi Haifa, and PSV. I feel like they should be doing better with those results. But Sweetie were even worse. Just the one win against Club Brugge, away from home no less. And then draws against Fiorentina, Slovan Bratislava, Victoria Pilsen. These are teams they should be getting stuff off of, more than just draws. And then defeats to Eintracht Frankfurt, Rangers, and Roma. That makes more sense. They did have quite a tough draw. But still, that was disappointing because it meant no teams into the knockouts of the Europa League. So disappointing there, and a lack of points being gained. But I feel like this is more of a blip, not the rule. So let's go to the Europa Conference League, where things were much different. And I mean much different. Zabar, 9th place. What a season from them. Birkirkara, 4th place. What a season from them. 14 points. Now, weirdly, Zabar actually won their first 4 games against Spartak Trnava, Boda, Astana, and Kalmar before losing their final 2 against Athletic Club and admittedly a relatively poor Olympiacos, who very much needed that win to even get into the knockouts themselves. Birkirkara, on the other hand, were just solid as a rock throughout. Malmö, Vålerenga, Shamrock Rovers, Boda again, draws this time against Lesničar, and also Rapid Vienna. Very good results, unbeaten, only 4 goals conceded. They learned from the Masters, and that meant they'd get a complete bye into the round of 16 of the Conference League. What a season from them. Zabar, on the other hand, would actually have to face off against Olympiacos, who would kind of struggle a little bit. But as you know, those struggles tend not to carry over when it's a club like Olympiacos, and it was a 3-0 victory. Super disappointing. We were gutted. And despite an incredible comeback where Zabar actually took them to extra time, they got it to 5-2 in that second leg, but unfortunately a 122nd minute goal was enough to sink our Maltese dreams. But they'd done well, but just so damn disappointed to not see them at least progress one more round, and we were very worried now because we were thinking, oh, Birkirkara could draw anyone here. But as it happened, they actually drew Spartak Trnava and absolutely clubbed them. 6-0 away from home in Slovakia, and Nuaha a hat-trick from Kieran Warner as well. The still not a Swedish international absolute gem of a player, Stava and Mariti with goals in there too. What a result that was, which then naturally was cancelled out by the drawing at home, but then I guess complacency is a hell of a drug. And in the next round, they'd actually face off against Molde, the team that had knocked out Olympiacos with another fantastic comeback against them. But Molde, of course, had finished 2nd in the group, and it didn't start too well. With a 1-0 defeat in Norway, not a particularly easy result for them to get, but then they clubbed them. Again, another clubbing, 4-1 victory. They really have got some great results under their wings this season. Stava's been sensational this year. They've got such a great core, and that was enough to get them through to the semi-finals. But spare a thought here for Linfield, who had just knocked out Rapid Vienna, and the Northern Irish club reached the semi-final of the Conference League, where they would play Wolfsburg in the next round. But nevertheless, what a result for them. Birkirkara would play Partizan for a place in the final, and it didn't go well. First leg, not great. Balan and Kuzdovic got the goals for Partizan, and I just felt any chance they had was going to have to come from getting that home win, because it's such a tough one to turn around away from home, and it proved to be exactly that. They got a 0-0 draw and played well, but it wasn't enough. In the end, Linfield only went out 7-4 in the semi-final. They scored 4 times against Wolfsburg. That's a hell of a result. Birkirkara to the semis is a hell of a result. So both of us reached the semis this year. Was like one step short of what we managed the last time we'd gone from a Club World Cup season, weirdly. That was when we reached the final, and so did Sweetie. Bit of a shame, but you can definitely see the building blocks are really starting to emerge, especially as on the year, we put in the 5th best points. 16.7. It is our best ever points season, except for this one. Now, I believe that with the dilution as well, it's almost on par with it, because of course we did that with 4 teams in Europe, which means we were getting, we're getting 20% less points now, I suppose, than we would have been before. So I think that actually this is certainly a season that is there to rival that. So very, very pleasing result indeed. And it's just a really good season for us in general. We obviously managed to consolidate 7th spot. The gap to the Netherlands is now, what's that, 12 points? Unfortunately, Portugal's insane season means they actually grow their gap over us. But on the plus side, we also gain great grounds on both France and a little bit of gains on Spain as well. Now, next year, of course, we're losing that 18.5 point season, but luckily the gap behind us is so large that I feel like the chances of us slipping from 7th is very, very unlikely, and I feel like we're only going to build from here, because I really feel like we should be going like semi-finals minimum almost every season now, because this squad is still only going to get better, and I've been saying this the last couple of years. It's a matter of time. I said within 5 years we'll win that Champions League. I believe next year is firmly going to be our biggest chance to date, but I'm very, very happy with the progress. I would like to see some more progression in Europe from some of the others, but they are getting there slowly. Obviously, with us starting a lot lower than last year and the club's reputation as being a lot lower, it's taken us a while to reach the point like we were with MTK, but I believe we're really getting onto that track now. We're just maybe a few seasons behind, as you'd expect. As for the youth intake, as usual, it was a complete festival of disappointment, half-star rated, ease throughout the board. But there is one player that I feel like I should at least briefly show you, and this is he. This is Jesmond Bugaja. Now, actually has some okay attributes in there, reasonable personality, but he is very injury prone. He's the only player that had any level of potential in there. He's not spectacular, probably will still end up as a really solid player for like a second tier side once he kind of hits that potential. Is still quite young, so there is room to grow, but I'm not expecting much from old Jesmond. Now, from a team stats perspective this year, Reynoso has actually taken a step back in terms of his goal scoring this year, but that is with him operating as a pressing forward, no longer being able to guy to get him behind all the time. Still scored 26 times and 12 assists, so 38 contributions is not bad. Perez continues to underwhelm and underperform that XG almost every year. Luckily this year, we created simply so many chances for him that it still makes him perhaps look better than he was at times. He had a habit of going missing. He was very, very inconsistent, basically. I don't know if he has low consistency. Let's have a little look here. He actually has high consistency and likes big matches, so I'm at a loss. Did manage to score actually 6 goals in the Champions League for us this year, but I believe that actually came in 2 hat-tricks randomly. He was very hit and miss at times, and eventually I feel like he will be phased out. We just don't have that guy that can replace him just yet. Pereira, on the other hand, though, great year. Like, for a guy that's basically operated as the backup to Padilla, 14 goals, albeit slightly underperformed as well, and a reasonable season from a player so young. Padilla, though, is the standout. 21 goals and 17 assists for Jose Padilla. He is a world-class player, lacking everything. He's got everything except the physical attributes, really, and he's managing to play around that now with the role that we've now got him in, and it's flourishing for him. 21 goals in 31 appearances and technically 17 assists, because obviously it's not counting Club World Cup in here. Either way, that's easily the best season of his career. And he's still only 27. He's in his prime right now. Consistent, world-class, loves big matches. He kind of ticks every box in that side of things, except for the physicals. Pebbles has also done very well this season as the SecondYellowCard. 10 goals for him this year. Not a bad sign at all. 8 assists. Again, really, really good play. The other good thing about Pebbles is that with him making those runs into that half space and dragging the fullback back, it's allowed a lot of space for Evtim Krastev, who's had the best year of his career as well. 17 assists, 3 goals, but it's the 17 assists that have absolutely done it. Lahovi and Palacio, again, have been a phenomenal tandem on the left-hand side. They've kind of been they've been very even in many ways. Lahovi's numbers are slightly better, but he's often played against the worst sides because he's usually the one that's playing in the league games. So I think that just shows how good Palacio still is at 31. He has got a long-term deal. Lahovi will eventually move into the spot, but we're going to wait until Palacio's physicals start to decline, because as you can see from him right now, he's still firmly at his peak. We are starting to see maybe a little drop off in a few areas, but nothing drastic just yet. Once this starts to go, and it will, because he's got relatively low natural fitness, then we'll have to start making that decision. But right now, he's still at the top of his game. Another one to highlight, actually, is Gert Gillet this season. 7 goals, which is, I'm sure, by far the most he's ever scored for us in a single season. Scored a couple of absolute screamers this year. He's just been as solid as a rock. And the fact that he's got 16 passing and 20 vision as well means that he can be so much more than just a pure ball-winning midfielder. But that's generally speaking where he tends to operate. But I'd happily play him as the Volante if he didn't have that poor finishing ability. The one player I'd say that's maybe disappointed me a little bit is Valmir. He's done some good things, but you could see just how much he's underperformed his chances. He actually had more XG this season than Pebbles did, but he scored literally 3 times less goals than him. Hopefully that's just a blip and he can be better next year, but it does show how important just being slightly better in the aggressive stuff makes a difference, and Valmir just hasn't quite been it. I do still have faith in him though, and if not, we've got Hubanov to bring into that spot anyway. Just quickly, generally speaking, this is the way we've lined up. I'm not going to look at the attribute progression of any players this year because there hasn't really been anyone that's like stepped up into that. Maybe we'll have a look at Reynoso next season though, because I know you guys want to see that and I want to show you that as well. But it's mostly been a lot of like our standard players that have kind of continued their form this year, but it's Perez, Reynoso, Padilla, generally speaking, Gillet and either Valmir or Pebbles, Krastev with obviously Vidazinia, and then Sauerschnig sometimes, Palacio or Lahovi. The backline's been brilliant though. Jezanovic, Vieira, Kadri, or we've also got Paez, we've got Birkeland in there too. There's so many players, Draman Fafana, we've got, even Palacio can play there. Oscar Lopez is up there, Guthmanson as well, Leo, Valenhaupt, Castro. It really is just the deepest part of our team. We've actually got more defensive lines than a hockey team. It's crazy. And of course, with Gutierrez in goal, Adam Mercer was the freebie guy that we brought in from Újpest of all places, just to come and join us. Hungarian international, done a solid job. Now, to the Malta national team. I feel like this might be a slightly longer recap video. I think it's just because we had so many transfers and a lot of stuff to talk about. But Malta up to 130th in the world. They did briefly blip back down, but they're back up again. The main reason for this, oh, that's the wrong one, although you might want to have a little look at the squad here, just so you can pause if you want to look at some of the clubs that these guys are playing. Just the 1 point, and it looks so bright because that point was actually against Switzerland, but they've just had nothing for them after that. Didn't get entirely clapped. It was Bosnia, actually, weirdly, that did the business. Portugal only scored 3 times against them. This year, they've only had a couple of friendlies, but wins against Albania with a goal from Vida, win against Algeria, a couple more friendlies coming up in June. It's this. September, autumn this year is huge because that right there, Slovenia will be very tough, is a Nations League group that I think they're going to want revenge in. They did really well last time, but that is going to be a tougher affair than it was last time. So, to the loan farm. 53 on loan, which of course you now know means 309 players, which actually is more than last season, weirdly, considering that wasn't even my intention. We're actually trying to drop it down slightly. Now, that will be the case as of the next year, though, I would say, because the plan is, using this new trick with the May 1st thing, we want to be getting some players out to the other Maltese clubs permanently, so they've got a bit more assets, and we're going to try and focus a few more on players that are actually good. As you'll see when I do this, I mean, not all of these are going to work, obviously, but there's some quite poor players out on loan as well, which is helpful for the second tier sides, of course, but it's not quite having the effect that it used to. It doesn't boost their squad strength in any way, but nevertheless, you'll see we've got some 3 stars, some 2.5 stars. It's making a huge difference. There's a lot more 2.5 star players out on loan now, like a lot more of them, and a lot of them are actually at Sweetie, who actually tried to sign Lucas Juarez, but he said no because he's being a wee-wee. However, Roy Fleming is joining Sweetie United permanently this summer for £2.5 million. He was never going to play for us, but he's such a good player for Sweetie, and I really think he could be doing a great job there on a permanent deal. But look at the sheer number of high potential guys we've got out there as well. It's really exciting, some of these guys we've got, especially some of the guys that weirdly at Dingley, which makes me think that these aren't actually good players. It's just the game seems to think they are. So I don't know. You know how the scouts can lie. All in all, though, fantastic. Top goal scorer this season was actually Georgia Kialu. I'm sorry if I've said that incorrectly, but 24 goals for him. Staver got 23 this year for Birkirkara. What a step up that's been. Roy gets himself 21. You can see here, of course, he is joining Sweetie United. 3 assists in there too. A few for the sort of second tier sides, which is nice. Mamadov is 16 as well. Top assister actually is Zhong Dong Sak with 18 assists for Sweetie. I've actually given him a new deal. He's now on £29,000 a week on loan, which just shows you how much, and he's still requesting a transfer, which is hilarious and has been for the past decade. But if we can keep him there, life will be good. As for the finances, £63 million in the bank. Terrific. We've technically made a profit this year of 3.3 million. It'll actually be more this year because we're still going to be owed some Champions League consolidation money or whatever, but I always do this before the Champions League final often because I don't want our stats to disappear when the season ticks over, so we should get a lot more money in as well. So that'll be good for FFP, which of course we're still passing with flying colours, but we do have to be careful when that quasi money moves off the balance sheet, so we'll have to be careful and be frugal. I want to be making like a steady 10-20 million pound profit a year over the next couple of seasons, but we've spent so much money this season that I feel like it's almost impossible for us to spend as much reasonably in the summer, although we do have an enormous budget to potentially use. We'll still make at least another 50 million pounds in sales. We'll do some cool flips again as well. I think we should be able to keep that motor running. As for the aims for season 20, it's a case of we need to do exactly what we did again this season. We only lost, I think, 4 games over the entire season. We lost the Super Cup final because we rotated the squad. We lost 1 random league game to Sweetie because we rotated the squad. We lost the semi-final of the Cup to Tarshin because we had no players, and we lost that second leg against Manchester City. That was the first defeat we'd had in the Champions League in the entire season, was the second leg of the semi-final. There's only so much you can do, and I feel like it really is just a matter of time before we get that Champions League. So, join us over on stream for a fun, vibey afternoon of Football Manager, because it's a Sunday, it's a beautiful day, I'm hoping. I'll probably be boiling my nuts off, but such is life. Yeah, join us over there for that. Drop a like if you've enjoyed, subscribe if you're new. Got some interesting stuff coming up soon now that I'm not working on that other project. We should see some more videos coming out soon, which is nice. I miss being able to make constant content. You know, it's kind of been weird lately the last couple of months. So I'll see you guys very soon. Hold your gun, capybara, bye-bye.